So let's begin now. Is there any legislator that would like to just give an opening remark? Just some comments about what happened this past legislative session? Or would you like to go right into questions?
Jump in.
Tony?
Testing. Thank you. My name is Tony Wisniewski. I represent District 5, which is Post Falls down to Worley, the southwest corner of Kootenai County. I'd like to just make some general remarks about what happened during the session, just to give you an idea of how busy we were. There were over 2,900 pieces of draft legislation that were written by Legislative Services Office. Of those, 1,000 became RSs and about 750 became bills. So you can see when we're exposed to 750 bills during a 3-month period, it just becomes, I'll use the word overwhelming. My particular opinion is that we have way too many laws, and we don't even know how many laws we have broken just coming to this event today. And by the way, I want to welcome everyone here and thank you for taking time out from a beautiful pre-summer day to come and listen to your legislators. It's really appreciated. Senator Publius Tacitus in the 1st century AD said, "When the government is most corrupt, there are the most laws." And I think that applies to us, and not just government corruption, but civilization corruption. We need to have a law that tells the city of Boise not to fly the gay pride flag. Why do we need a law to do that? And then when we write the law, they flaunt it by saying, this is now an official city flag. The law says one official city flag, and they've made several of their flags official. So they're flaunting the Attorney General, and you people ask us why we don't put teeth in some of these laws. The reason is because some of the legislators are so on the same side as the mayor of Boise that if we put those kind of enforcement regulations in the legal language, they wouldn't even pass. We like to think of the legislature as being conservative. It's about a 50-50 relationship, and there's been a study that says that the more Republicans there are in a particular legislature, the more liberal the legislature is, because when the Republicans are a minority, they fight like hell to keep things under control, and they just don't have enough power. That's about all I'd like to say about the law. There's a whole bunch of things that were passed this year that were great. This has been our best year so far. I'm really encouraged by the amount of good legislation that was passed, and it was because of voters like you that are now paying closer attention to who they elect. They don't just listen to the politicians claim that they're conservatives. That is one of the most abused words in the political realm right now. Conservatism, the word doesn't mean anything anymore. It's been hijacked by the other side. So I thank you for allowing me to give you these opening remarks.
Tony, if I could just tag on to that. You said about 750 bills came through the legislature this year.
That is correct.
And how much staff support do you have?
We have one secretary per legislative pod that covers things like email, maybe looking at some of your mailings to your constituents, and that's it.
Yeah.
So that one secretary may represent 8 to 10 to 12 people.
Yeah.
It's a whole lot less what the Senate has. The Senate is like 5 people, and they have a dedicated staff member.
And that's kind of a feature in some respects, because folks know that, and it becomes overwhelming, like you said, and it's almost impossible to go through every one of these bills and even have time to just contemplate the pros and cons and the unintended consequences, because that's one of the big problems with legislation, is it gets kind of rammed through, and then, like that one representative famously said, we need to pass it so we can figure out what's in it, right? And so that is a feature in Boise for our legislators, where they just overwhelm them with so many bills. And so I'm glad you brought that up. Anyone else want to? Phil?
Thanks, Bruce. This is an issue that I've actually been working on, so I feel like compelled to say a few words. We do have some administrative help during the session, but once we leave Boise, there's no one. We don't have an office. We don't have anyone on staff, and it is really hard to keep up with everything. And it was Nancy Pelosi who said we need to pass a bill so we can figure out what's into it. So that don't.
I know who that was.
But it is overwhelming, and what we want to do in Boise is we don't want to necessarily have small government for the sake of having small government. If you look up the word small, it means inconsequential. We want to have limited government where we have the appropriate resources where that's needed so that we can do our job. If you look at the Idaho state budget in terms of a pie chart, the slice of the pie that the legislative branch of government gets is 1/700th of the pie. When I served in the House 20 years ago, it was 1/400th. I didn't think that was enough. So we need to have resources in the legislature so we can handle the workload that's in front of us, but we don't want to be for big government. Somehow this. But anyways, we don't want to be for big government, so we just want limited government where we have the appropriate resources where they're needed, and we need to be able to stand up to what we call the administrative state down in Boise. It's the administrative state that's run in the state of Idaho. And the legislature, according to in my opinion, the Declaration of Independence, Federalist Paper number 51, and the scriptures is the representative of the people and needs to be the strongest of the three branches. So thanks, Bruce.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. It doesn't matter what size the government is, there is a little bit of a administrative state everywhere. There's a little bit in the county, I'm sure there's a little bit in the cities, obviously in Boise, and of course we all know that we have a rather large administrative state in Washington, D.C. And we're witnessing it fighting back against Trump, which represents the will of us, the people. Let's go into our first question here. Oh, I'm sorry, Joe, did you want to say something?
I think it's on. Yeah, there we go. Representative Vishnevsky, my friend here, talked about people ignoring laws. This, Boise, in particular, ignoring a law that was passed earlier this year on flying official flags. Abortion is illegal in Idaho, right? Thank heaven that's been done. However, I was informed as we walked in this morning that the local Walgreens is selling RU-486 over the counter. It's an abortion pill. And I'm going to go over there afterwards, and I encourage some of you to do the same, and talk to the manager. It is at the Walgreens on Honeysuckle, I'm told. I've also spoken to Sheriff Norris about it. But we will not have abortion in this state.
Thank you. Okay, let's go into this question. We're going to start off with a big one here. And what I'd like to do is we can have one of you raise your hand if you want to take the question on. And if anyone else would like to add to that, we'll go that way. I wanted to avoid asking a question and having every representative and senator answer that question. I think it would be a little too redundant. So we're going to start with this one. Is there anyone on the panel willing to take on the enormous task of replacing our property tax and/or our income tax with a sales tax? The sales tax, so a user tax. Is there anyone? Jordan?
Yeah, this is something that Jordan Redmond, District 3 here in Kootenai County, but that's something that has recently come to light, I think, with some of the movement from Governor DeSantis in Florida. I think looking into that, I recently spoke with our Speaker of the House, Mike Moyle, who does a fair amount of tax law in the state, and so trying to find a path forward there with if you relieve the burden of property tax, which I am against. I think you don't really ever own your property when you have to pay property tax to the government. How do you offset that with a sales tax? And so kind of looking through that and working with LSO to determine what kind of formula you could come up with to help with that. Yeah.
I'd like to just comment as well. So one of the things that Senator Hart's been talking about, at least for the 15 years I've been involved, is substituting some kind of a financial transaction tax. When you think of the amount of electronic transactions with respect to debit, credit, stocks, bonds, these kinds of internet transactions, if there were a percentage taken from that, imagine how many hundreds of millions, if not billions, would come through. Maybe even 1% would take care of a lot of the property tax in and of itself. The question would be, even if we did substitute it with sales tax or whatever, how do we stop those local agencies from passing bonds and levies, et cetera? So there's got to be some way that once you get, like they did with the schools, was like, okay, the state's going to take over the schools. And then they continued to have local funding and local levies. We've got to figure out some way that they can be kept whole, the local highway districts, et cetera. And at the same time, take that burden off of the property itself. So as you know, it's complex, and there's got to be a way forward here, but it may be a mix of sales tax, consumption tax, and transaction tax, but something that can alleviate that burden and at the same time keep it from coming back. That's all I have to think.
Thank you. Senator Taves?
Thank you. Yeah, Ben Taves, State Senator, District 4, that's here in Coeur d'Alene. This has been something I've been interested in since I first got elected, but here's my concern. Government has a tendency to grow no matter what we do. And what's happened in the past is we've looked at a situation where we took away property taxes by increasing sales taxes, and then property taxes came back. So I would only support this if we could figure out a way that we could make sure that property taxes go away for good. Because the problem is that it just, it's the next election cycle. Some people are in there who aren't as conservative or okay with property taxes, and then you end up with higher sales taxes and property taxes again.
Bruce?
Anybody? Yeah.
Senator Taves makes a really good point. In 2010 or 2011, I did a personal bill, I think it was House Bill 454, which would have eliminated the personal income tax and increased the sales tax to 9%. And so I think it's doable, but I want to make a few comments about what Representative Barbieri said. The transaction tax was first proposed by a Professor Figge from the University of Wisconsin. He calculated that at a rate of 0.25% tax on all financial transactions moving through the banking system, you can run the federal government, state government, and county government. So there's some big dollars that move through the banking system. So I'm actually going to bring a bill this fall that will propose that. If I could get it done in 5 years, that would be probably in the Guinness Books of World Records. So it's going to be a heavy lift. It'll be hard to do, but I'm going to at least put it out there for the debate.
Could I, okay, go ahead.
I am all for getting rid of the property tax because there's three major taxes: sales tax, income tax, and property tax. And property tax basically makes you a serf to the local government, the county government or city government. However, we have to be very careful, as one of my fellow legislators said. How do we determine what funding the state gives to each county or to each municipality to offset the property tax and levies that they may propose? Do we just allow every taxing agency to submit a budget to the county who then represents that to the state and then the state pays that? That is a recipe for disaster, because you will see a Christmas wish list from every county to the state government, and guess who pays the taxes that the state is going to return to the counties? It's you all. And this gives an out to the local municipalities. The only good thing about property tax, the only very little good thing about property tax is the fact that it's local, and if you don't like the increases in the taxes that the taxing districts charge you, there's always the recourse of you getting involved, getting inflamed enough to march down to City Hall or to the hospital district or to the sewer district and water district and demand that they change their leadership, and that happens through elections. So keeping the taxing requirement local is something we have to consider when we shift that burden over to the state. So we have to make sure that we understand the issue of unintended consequences.
And if I could add a little bit to that, one of the things, just from the county commissioner perspective, is we get a portion of the sales tax from the state, and that's driven by the economy. When the economy is good, we get more revenue. When the economy goes down, we get less revenue. Property taxes actually remain relatively constant. And so the county actually counts on those property taxes to be a more stable source of income, where the sales tax can go up and down based upon economic factors. Now, and that's what, I'm saying this because there's a lot of complexity here. There's a lot of factors. And so to suggest making a big change like this, which can be done and has been done in other states, there's a lot of things to consider. Another factor is that at the county government, about 60% of our budget goes towards public safety. That is more than what we collect in property taxes. So the property taxes alone don't cover the public safety aspect of county government, and that's to maintain the jails, that's for patrol, that's for 911, that's for the prosecutor's office. We recently got rid of the public defender's office, the court system. It costs a lot of money. Public safety is one of the most expensive components in local government, believe it or not. So it's very complex, and as much as I would love to not have to ask for anyone to contribute property tax, I don't want to have to pay for property tax. If it's not done right, it can create a lot of problems in a community. So thank you. Let's go to judicial reform. With activist judges, what legislation can be done to address that? Anyone want to take that on? Anyone part of a judicial committee deals with that?
It's a hot topic. It's one of the things that is, and all I'm going to do is whine here, but you know, when I first went to the...
You get 2 minutes.
Okay. Okay, so one of the things that this whole idea that Article 5 convention and the rest of it, and amendments to the Constitution, the issue has always been brought up by me to those that were talking about that. How do we deal with the judiciary? And it's amazing to me that we've seen, and this has been 15 years, of course, I've been working on this, or at least talking about it, and it's amazing to me that we've seen now a continued expansion of the judicial power, even though the official restraints on that power have been in place, you know, for centuries. So it's astounding to me that, for instance, the executive branch of, say, the federal government is even concerned about making sure that the Supreme Court gets a chance to weigh in on some of these lower court decisions that are restricting his power. In Idaho specifically, it's not, you know, well, one of the examples we point to is the elections. When we're going to have an election on a judge, the ballot itself says to replace Judge X, and then the person that's running is Judge X. And why is that? Why don't they do that with us in the constituent, you know, the legislature, to replace Vito? Oh, Vito's there, and whoever else. Well, the constituents, I mean, the individuals that are there are going to have that leg up, that opportunity to be re-voted in because, well, for a number of reasons. So the judiciary has a lot of power that they can take for themselves, starting way back in Marbury versus Madison, when they said we're the last arbiter of what's constitutional. That should not be the case. But to usurp that power or to address that power when we have the separation of powers issue is a very difficult task. That's my whine. Thank you.
And what about getting rid of title ballots or ballot titles? Getting rid of so that you, just like the rest of us, you just get your name and you don't get to identify that one is the judge and one is running against the judge.
Yeah, I think another possible solution would honestly look at having partisan elections for judges, because at least at that point you would understand a little bit more on which line of the law they probably would lean on.
Assuming that they're not just filling out the card and checking the box.
Yeah, that's
right?
correct. As well as I met with a group last week that's actually setting up a local group that's doing kind of a judicial watch locally to kind of see how our local judges are rendering decisions, which I think is healthy, right? Because oftentimes you don't know those decisions if you're not in the court system. Whereas if, you know, there was a group that was kind of looking at some of those decisions and making sure that they were decisions that were comfortable with you as a constituent, I think that's also, you know, information is really healthy.
Yeah. The Sheriff Norris would like to make a comment on the judge's report.
Having several events with judges in the incoming future. I appreciate all of them. That's all I have to say on that. No. But what I would like to say is that we should consider that we have some mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines on some statutes. So we should consider putting every person convicted of child molestation shall be sentenced to 10, 15, or 20 years. Right now, we have people over here that are sentencing people on child molestation for probation or 10 years suspended sentence. So yeah, I believe that we should remove all the obstacles that prevent us from doing that. We do have minimum sentencing on some statutes. Every person convicted of robbery shall be sentenced to 5, 7, or 10 years. And then you have a low term, mid term, and a high term that the judges get to decide.
I'm looking at the time here to see how long we had this discussion. I brought up the mandatory minimum issue when we met with the judges here locally a few months back, because I was saying that my concern is taking away their discretion. If we get to the point where there is no discretion with respect to the judicial determinations, we might as well have an AI computer up there making the determination. It was interesting to me to hear their reaction, because part of what they said was that the prosecuting attorney makes the determination as to what he'll bring. So remember, the plea bargaining that is done to avoid the mandatory sentence will allow them to get a conviction without a trial. And an individual that is, use pedophilia as an example, whatever that may be, let's assume that it's marginal. Maybe what's actually happening here? Did it actually happen? But I've got a choice as being accused to fight this battle, and it costing more money than I have completely, house, equity, and everything else, or just plead to make sure that I don't get the mandatory sentence if I lose. The dynamics of plea bargaining and the dynamics of the judges, they don't mind these mandatory sentences because they seldom come to that. They're always plea bargained down. The system itself has its own problems, and there's no panacea. Mandatory minimums may be a part of that, but remember, the process itself of prosecution is a little more complex than, here's the facts, he's a pedophile, throw the key away. Thank you.
Representative Price.
Thank you, Representative Price, District 4 Representative. That was redundant, sorry. I want to point out that we do have a county prosecutor that when he was running to be a judge, he really wanted to make it apparent what these judges were doing. And he actually runs a Facebook that puts out what these judges are doing. So he's trying to shed light on what's going on with our judicial system. And so I just wanted to give him kudos, because he really is making it apparent that we need to look into this. The other thing that I know is going on is there's a couple of groups within Idaho, one in southern Idaho, one in northern Idaho, that have concerns about judges, and they've reached out to the legislature, and the legislature has an impeachment process that they have never used. And so I know I took it to leadership, and they are looking into what that process is, and if it gets to that point, that we're ready to enact on that if it really does come to that point.
I'd like to make a couple of points. First of all, when a judge appears on the ballot unopposed, don't fill in the bubble. He's going to win anyway. The second reason, which is even more important, is that if a recall is initiated, you need 50% of the signatures that were required to vote that judge in. So if 1,000 people vote for a judge that's going to get it anyway, you need 500 people to sign a petition for a recall. If only 100 people fill in the bubble, for a judge that's going to win anyway. You only need 50 people to sign a petition to start a recall petition. All right, so that's one reason. Number two, judges are human beings just like the rest of us, and we are a fallen people. We have been corrupted by the culture. We are the culture. If you look back to the biblical history in the Old Testament, the judges were part of the Israeli, the Hebrew culture and religion. Now, we have insisted, and especially in our country, that we divide religion from the state. And this is where it's gotten us. You know, we've outlawed prayer in school and made homosexual marriage legal and a whole bunch of other things. We've separated true faith and religion from morality in the public sphere. And the judges kind of follow along. They're not spearheading this effort. They're just part of this misguided culture that I talked about in my opening remarks. So we've got to get back to strengthening our culture.
Thank you. And if I could just add on to that, our prosecuting attorney, Stanley Mortensen, on his Facebook page, on the office's Facebook page, he lists what he's asking for sentences and what the judges give for sentences. So it's a good place, it's a good resource to look at that. So when these judges come back on the ballot, you have a much better idea of how tough or not they are on crime. So just a little tidbit there for you. This next question, Senator Hart, it's for you. All right. And I know that Representative Barbieri kind of touched on this too, so he might have something to say. Your proposal to levy a tax on all transactions going through the banking system, do you propose that this would include all electronic checks, written checks that would include house payments, utility payments, etc.?
Okay, thank you for the question. We wouldn't discriminate. If the money's moving through the banking system, it would be subject to the tax. And as I said before, this professor who conceived of this system thought you could run the entire government at all levels on 1/4 of 1%. So be a very small tax. The way I envision it happening is if the money's not moving through the banking system, if it's a cash transaction, it'd be exempt from the tax. So I haven't drafted the bill yet. It's something I'm gonna have ready for next session, and I'm looking forward to the debate on it.
All right, thank you. Representative Barbieri? Okay. This one is for Representative Alfieri. Will you try to pass legislation regarding limited mail-in voting to military, I can't read this, shut-ins, etc. again? To the military or people who are shut in, I guess, into their house. They can't get out of their house.
Yeah, I'll go at it one more time. This will be my fourth attempt to get such limitations on absentee ballots. My feeling about absentee ballots is that if you have a legitimate reason to vote absentee, it's fair. If you work, for example, in a job that prevents you, for example, you're a firefighter, you're on 24-hour duty, you can't get to the polling station, that's a legitimate reason. If you're just voting by absentee ballot for convenience, that is not a legitimate reason. You need to go to the election station and vote. The Constitution says we have an election day. It does not say we have an election week or an election month. And the reason for that is that you have to show your face, frankly, to the local poll workers so that they can identify you and say that it's a legitimate ballot. When you have mail-in ballots, the potential for fraud is enormous because you don't have a chain of custody that's verifiable. We don't know who put that ballot in the mail. We don't know who signed that ballot. We don't know if you're being influenced on that ballot when you're filling out that ballot. If someone is at your side saying, check this box or check that box, it is potentially a real problem. So I will go at it one more time. We were unable to even get it through State Affairs this time because The State Affairs Committee has changed its composition a little bit, not quite as conservative as it was in the previous session. But I think it's something we need to do. As I say, there are legitimate reasons for voting absentee. Being too lazy to go is not a legitimate reason. If you can get out to Walmart to do your shopping, if you can get out to the Albertsons to do your shopping, if you can go out to church on Sunday, you can certainly vote to preserve our republic.
Thank you. All right, this next question falls along the lines of MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. Is there a plan to take pesticides out of our food on a state level, including farming practices? Anyone want to take that on?
I can take that one on. I think that there's been a number of different ideas thought through on kind of the MAHA movement and what that looks like, and having better health outcomes, and as well as getting a lot of those poisons outside of our food and different things like that. I recently was actually invited back to the White House for the MAHA report, and so I was able to meet with a number of our secretaries over there that are looking at these health movements. And so I think we're going to see some model legislation kind of working with the federal government on how to get these things accomplished, but I do not have a draft on that yet, but I will say it's up for discussion. And I think there was one other, or at least one other person up here that had an invite too, but wasn't able to make it, so.
Anybody else? Okay.
Thanks, Bruce. 2012, I ran a bill. It was called the Food Freedom Act, and it was an attempt to eliminate the barriers between a consumer and a farmer. So you could evaluate the farmers in the area and decide if there was any of them that you wanted to do business with directly without a middleman. I think we could try to do that again. I had a meeting with the Department of Agriculture after the session, and me and an organic farmer went to that meeting, and the Department of Agriculture had 23 people in a room to meet with us. So it was a bit overwhelming, but anyways, that's something that we could try to do in the future.
Thank you. Okay. Next question. Is there progress being made to not rely on federal funds to the state, and also getting Idaho land back from the feds? Anyone want to take that question? Are we trying to do anything to
No progress.
restrict our reliance or reduce our reliance on the federal government money?
What, JFAC, how much money came in from the feds? $8 billion, $9 billion?
39% out of 8.9.
You want to?
13.9.
JFAC.
Carl Bierke, Senator, District 5. The question, is there something that we can do to take our lands back, right? 61, I've heard different figures, what percentage? I've heard 62, someone said 63 the other day. It's over 60%. Right? It's a complicated issue. You think about what that land is being used for. Think about the INL land mass, for the Idaho National Labs. Super complex issue, but we can really address more or less the question of, can we take less federal money? We talked about this a little bit in the last town hall. There was a candlelight, and you have to realize that we pay money into the federal system. How much of that money do you want coming back? And I think everybody up here might have a different answer for you. I want that money back. I want 100% of that money back. Okay, and there's potentially anywhere from another 10 to 30% in addition to what we pay into the federal government for the money that we give back. You think about that. Now think about the issue of the lands and how complex that is. How much money should we get because the federal government owns 60+% of our lands? So this issue of sizing out federal money is to say that, well, we don't want our money back. It's like filing a tax return and you get, notice that you can get $2,000 back and you say, oh, just keep that money. Yeah, is the federal government in debt to like 36 trillion? Yes, that's a big deal. But we should reap the rewards, the money that our taxpayers put into that system. What does it go to? It goes to roads and highways. It goes to our partnerships on our health programs, Medicaid. This isn't money that's just going in somebody's pockets. You know, we can talk about Medicaid. You know, a lot of people don't like Medicaid. But what happened during Obama administration with the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare? We've slowly dismantled what used to be an existing, fairly decent healthcare system in this country, to the point now where we have to rely on things like Medicaid. In my district, it's 1 in 5 people are on Medicaid. So, like we talked about other things, when it comes to the finances of this state, you know, I'll take a second because I haven't said a whole lot up here today, and I'm not avoiding anything. But people always say, well, how are we doing as a state? And I mentioned at the last town hall, we're doing fabulous. There'll be some people that say we shouldn't spend any money, not even our state money. We shouldn't increase budgets. We're a growing state. This came out a couple days ago. This is from our treasurer. Let me just read what a healthy economy is. Boise, today, Fitch, it's a rating, like Moody's or Standard & Poor's, reaffirmed Idaho's AAA insurer default rating. IDR, that's like our bond rating. Citing the state's broad powers over spending and revenues, strong reserve levels, low long-term liability burden, and expected solid long-term economic growth. The top-tier rating reflects Idaho's conservative fiscal practices and consistent economic growth. Fitch also noted the state's strong reserves and ability to adapt to changing economic conditions. Fitch believes Idaho is well positioned to absorb multiple rounds of recent tax cuts and dedicated spending allocations from the general fund, given Idaho's prudently managed budget with significant one-time spending that rolls off to create fiscal capacity. This rating ensures Idaho continues to access low-cost financing and signals ongoing confidence in the state's financial stability. Idaho State Treasurer Julie Ellsworth stated, achieving a triple credit rating once again is a testament to Idaho's strong financial management and unwavering commitment to fiscal responsibility. These are complex issues. You have at least 2 people here on this panel that are on JFAC. That's the Joint Finance Appropriations Committee. It's made up of the House Appropriations Committee and the Senate Finance Committee. There's a lot of work that goes into managing the money for the state of Idaho. This is what our treasurer says about the state of our economy. So, as we're talking about these issues, it's very complex. Would it be nice that the federal government wasn't $36 trillion in debt? Nobody would be talking about this. Everybody would be saying, I want my tax money coming back to my state for my roads, for our Medicaid program, and for whatever else. Some of the money comes back into our college system. But because of the debt of the federal government, this becomes a huge issue. But I'm here to tell you that the work is being done at the state level to make Idaho's economy, great. That's what we should be applauding here and not worrying about how much money we're getting back that we put into the federal system.
Senator Lane, did you want to say something?
Yes. So I'm the other one that's on the JFAC committee. I'm on the Appropriations Committee on the House side. There's a couple things that we have to look at when we're talking about taking back the federal lands. There are groups out there that are opposed to that because they're concerned about selling it off to private. So it's not something that everybody is on board with. That is a true concern of a lot of people in Idaho, that if Idaho were to get this land back, that they would sell it and put it in private hands and build more housing and all that kind of stuff. So that is a real concern when it comes to that aspect of it. The other thing about JFAC, and this was my first year on this committee, and the federal government kind of makes it easy to take money because they offer all of these grants. And so our state and our agencies are kind of in the mode that that's what they need to do is apply for these grants, apply for this money. So we have to change a mindset down there before we're going to be able to get us weaned off of the federal money. The other aspect is that the federal government has a hand in it as well, and it's something that was discussed quite a bit this session, is if the federal government shuts down a program, we're not going to replace it with state funds. So if the federal government does follow with the DOGE that they've been talking about, and the federal funds do not flow into the state for these grants, then the state is not going to replace it with state money, and that's going to help as well.
Thank you. This next question, when will we get our budget under control, and when will we be able to codify what DOGE has done? And I'd like to direct this question to Senator Berkey. Is our budget out of control?
Absolutely not. It is appropriately growing for the growth of the state. I just read what the treasurer has said about the budget. And that's going to be, somebody might have a different perspective of that, but it's not out of control. Since I've been in JFAC, we've done, I'll have to admit it, we've changed a lot about how we've done the budget process. Within my first term, we went to separating those budgets out to what we call the maintenance budget versus the line items. We've gone to a performance-based. We're moving this time into the ability to go back into the base, and we've got tools that can tell us what was appropriated in past years and what is that money currently used for. All that to say is that our state has a constitutional requirement to have a balanced budget every year. So one of our jobs in JFAC is to get that accomplished. Right? We can't just say, no, we don't like it. At some point, it's got to be done. Nothing closes down, we don't sign any die until that budget's done. That's important to know. So we look at the percentage increase year over year from base budget to base budget. I don't believe that it's in excess of what the factor would be for inflation and population growth. And again, there's different opinions about that. But Idaho is doing well. Idaho is changing and really drilling down on the budget process. We're adapting, we're getting better. I have a lot of faith in the process moving forward. As long as I'm on the finance committee, I'm anxious about the next step that we're going to take. And I don't want to paint a picture that we're this sinking ship and our economy is like following what the federal government is doing. I don't think that's positive and healthy. I think we're doing a good job here in Idaho. And if we weren't, I'd be up here telling you that that's the case.
Okay, Senator Berkey, thank you. Representative Hawkins, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, thank you, Dale Hawkins, Legislative District 2, and I'm not on JFAC. Praise God. It's a second marriage, you can ask those that serve on it. It's an all-consuming fire that demands all your time. But I don't want to misinterpret. I believe this question was probably directed at our federal government. The state of Idaho does not have a DOGE that is active. And if you're worried about what they are or aren't doing, I will admit that our federal representatives don't seem to be taking ground while they can. And that's who you would need to direct this frustration toward, is our Senate, our US senators and our representatives that sit in DC. That's where this is falling down. And 36 trillion is a terrifying number. And Senator Bierke is correct that, I mean, I don't know that we say that we have a balanced budget. What we have is a zero-based budget. So if you want to stop growth in Idaho, we've got to cut the intake or the government will spend the money.
Yeah. Senator Berkey.
Just real quick about the DOGE part. you know, now this past session is not in the rearview mirror too far, but we're all into interim committees now. And one of the interim committees I was asked to be on is the Doge committee. I don't know if that's going to come to fruition, but real quickly, Doge is about government accountability and efficiency in spending money, right? You see what's happened at the federal level. We do that in Idaho well before Doge was Doge in the federal government level. We do that. That's what we do. And we're going to look at it. When they do surveys and they talk to people about budgets, it's not so much about appropriately funding the state that people are bothered by. People don't want waste, fraud, and abuse. And that's what Doge is designed to do, is for us to find waste, fraud, and abuse. It doesn't get in the way of us appropriately funding the government. So we are looking at a committee. I was asked to be on that committee. Yeah.
And the number one driver of growth of the government growth is population growth. I mean, certainly that's the case at the county. Let's switch gears into education. I have a number of questions here. Why isn't Idaho getting more bang for our buck in education? Anyone want to comment on that? Representative Hawkins.
Thank you. I'm going to go out on a limb and try to interpret what the bang for your buck is. I do sit on the House Education Committee as the vice chair. I will say that we did advance more this year than probably that committee's done in a long time. But as far as why aren't we getting the bang for our buck, our whole education system has been hijacked by a culture war that is more concerned about teaching your children that they can make a bathroom option or a gender option than reading, writing, arithmetic, social sciences, and study. We fought for things this year that I didn't realize we'd have to fight for. Representative Wisniewski had to fight to get a bill through, I think it was his bill, just that we would have a standard for kids to learn cursive writing. Because we all know that without cursive writing, no one will ever be able to read our original documents. These are the things that we're trying to get into practice. But part of that is that we have a higher education system that is turning out teachers that believe these other things. The value system is corrupt and broken. And I'm not sure, it's going to take a long time to try to push back. We had some great success. Senator Taves pushed the repeal of DEI from higher education. That was great ground we made this year. That bill came out of a task force that went over the previous year, and it was successful. It probably didn't go as far as we need to go all the way, but at least we've gained ground. Now, the thing is, within the education system, there are people that will try to figure out a way to subvert the laws that we pass. You know, we see that in education. You know, people talk about the flag bill, stuff like that. When government passes a bill that restricts government, do we have to put a penalty everywhere? You know, Montana just did a flag bill. They didn't put a penalty in it. I don't know if they're having problems yet. We have people that need to obey the law, and that includes in education. And we will work very hard this next year, and as long as I'm in the committee, and I know that there are some others here in the committee, that we will work for you and try to do better. We are so far behind. They keep people don't even realize how far behind we are. We're coming in between 30 and 45% on reading and math. That's with standards being lowered. We have entire school districts in the Boise area that have 21 languages, and they're not teaching them English. They're hiring interpreters. So we have huge problems in the system that we need to fix, and we can do it one bite at a time, but we won't be able to do it without you folks. If the folks don't engage and the folks don't get involved, we're 105 people in Boise. It's already been spoken about how those who might think like those of us in this room are outnumbered. The way we can gain ground is when the folks get involved And when you guys press, things change.
Thank you. And now let's, since you're on the committee, Representative Hawkins, let's talk about the federal government. Does their money?
I'd like to weigh in on that last question. if I may.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Representative.
Yes, I also serve on the House Education Committee along with Representative Hawkins and my seatmate Ron Mendive, who expressed his regrets not being able to come here to the meeting today. One of the biggest things we've done this session was House Bill 93, school choice. Now this provides state funding for private and religious schools. Competition is what's going to drive improvement. If you have a town where you've got a Burger King, a McDonald's, and a Taco Bell, and they're all owned by the same person at the top of the franchises, what kind of service and improvements do you expect to see when there are complaints from a customer? Oh, you don't like McDonald's? Go over to Burger King and have the same customer experience over there. That's what we see now. We've got STEM schools, we've got magnet schools, we've got charter schools, we've got regular public schools, we've got alternative schools, and that is the whole entity of what you have for school choice. Now we finally have the private citizen engaged in that, who can create his own schooling environment for his kids, micro schools, pods. I was just talking to someone the other day. They have a neighborhood school where there's a bunch of kids that get together and learn. So competition is going to be the cure for all of that. Also this year, I was the co-sponsor of a requirement not only for cursive writing, but for Western civilization being taught in the school. Our kids are so ignorant of our system that we have, our government system, they don't know the difference. It's amazing that 30, 40, 50% of kids today at the post-high school level think that socialism is just fine. They haven't had the experience in life. Wait till they get their first paycheck and find out what taxes have been taken out. That'll be a big blow to the head. So we've got to get back to the roots and explain to our kids how this country has become the greatest country in the world. Another bill that was passed was Kyle Harris. He's down in District 6. He's the successor to Mike Kingsley. He actually had to write a bill, and once again, you shouldn't have to have these kind of crazy bills. This bill says that when the educational organizations are given money for a particular purpose, guess what? The bill requires them to spend it on the purpose that was originally appropriated. Let me give you an example. A couple of years ago, we passed a bill that says every teacher in the state will get a $5,000 bonus. You'd be surprised how many teachers did not get that bonus because it's sent to the school district for disbursement and they use it for something else other than what it was intended. So we have to write a bill that says if we give you $100 million for literacy, you can't spend it on playground equipment or for teacher advancement on days off. These are just common sense things that are no longer common sense anymore. So I think the biggest single issue that we have been able to accomplish this session was House Bill 93, school choice.
Senator Bates. Julie.
Yeah, just really quickly, the question had to do with how we can get more bang for our buck. The reality, the current state in Idaho is that of the 50 states, we're at the very bottom in funding, and we're around the middle as far as outcomes in education. Now, I don't have a huge problem with that. I'd rather be at the top in outcomes and still low in spending, but I'm just saying that it's not like we're pouring a huge amount of money comparatively into the system and getting horrible outcomes. But the real solution and the real answer to that question is school choice, and it needs to be expanded because what we've done is we've kind of created a pilot program. It won't serve the number of students that need it. It is a refundable tax credit, and a refundable tax credit means the money goes to the parents, and the parents decide where the money goes. So the parents are going to choose where their kids are best educated. That's the best system you can have, where parents have the complete choice of how to educate their children. And I'm just excited to see that expand, and I think we have to expand it in the next session.
And is this similar to a voucher? Because I have a question on vouchers, which is how can they be used out of district? Do you get a check? Are they tax write-offs? Who are against them, and why? Who benefits? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Of course, yeah. So the opposition calls it usually a voucher scheme. So it's a scheme if you don't like it, I guess. It's not a voucher and it's not a scheme. It's a refundable tax credit. So at the end of the year in your tax return, if you choose not to put your kids in the public school system and you can prove that you have receipts that you spent money for their education outside of the public education system, then you get that amount of money back if you're approved for the program. So it's not a voucher, it's refundable tax credit, similar to child tax credit would be something that's similar at the state and federal level. It's up to $5,000.
Tony?
Yes, you asked about whether or not this is a voucher system. I'd like to contrast the other system of financing private education, and that's the educational savings account. And I have a daughter that lives was Miami, now it's Jacksonville. She told me, and I didn't know this, that the system that they use in Florida is the educational savings account. So businesses or individuals can contribute to a student's savings account, so it isn't money from the government, it's private money that gets diverted pre-tax to help out students. So the Albertson Foundation, for instance, here is a big proponent of educational reform. They would give some money to these educational savings accounts, and then the students can draw that money out for legitimate educational expenses. We have the tax credit where up to $5,000 for a normal student, you would get a tax credit for expenses that you have for each individual child.
Thank you. Okay, this next question is geared towards teachers' unions. Does the state collect teachers' unions' dues? And if the state does collect it and then decided to refuse to collect it, would it aid in eliminating those unions or reducing the union power? Senator Hawkins, I'm sorry, Representative Hawkins. They're rubbing off on you.
No.
I heard nothing.
Well, the first thing I'll say is the teachers' unions have made it clear that those of us involved in education in Idaho are their enemies, and they're coming after each and every one of us, and they're going to spend a fortune to try to get rid of us because we have had a successful year. But to answer the question is yes, the state on a deduction line, or the municipality, I should say, because they're paid through the counties, does deduct the dues for the teachers' unions. We've tried 2 years in a row to make some ground so that the state would stop acting as a third party for the unions. And believe it or not, we've had a horrendous time getting traction on that. I am sure that it will come again. We've had other unions who nobody's going after anything they're doing, that have jumped in the fight to protect the teachers' unions. And it's a little bit of an odd couple thing because they don't even share societal ideas and culture ideas that the teachers' unions seem to be pushing here in the state of Idaho. So yes, that is correct. It is collected that way, and we are going to probably try again, and we'll see where it goes.
Okay, well, here's a slight follow-up. How can we get our local schools to have required daily Bible reading and the 10 Commandments placed back in all of the schools? Is that something that's even possible?
So I actually had a bill last year that was introduced to the Education Committee that allowed for, or mandatory had daily Bible reading with no instruction in that, and that's kind of based on our historical precedent that we set in the state of Idaho. And then back in '62, they pulled that out. However, they pulled that out based on the Lemon test, and now the Supreme Court is going off of history and tradition. So it completely fits within our history and tradition to have Bible reading done in schools, and so that will be coming back next year.
Just to add to that, on the same lines, Representative Hawkins actually ran a chaplaincy bill that would put chaplains or give the option of putting chaplains in our schools, which I think would be a really beautiful thing. And I'm hoping we can make another run at that as well.
All right, thank you. Okay, this question is for the senators. Senator Guthrie is chair of the Senate State Affairs Committee. He votes to the left of some Democrats despite claiming to be Republican. He has used his position to block many good bills. Will you remove him?
You know, that's your job.
Yeah.
Well, he's not in any of these districts, so I think it just has to do with leadership and, you know, what will happen with leadership moving forward based upon how some of these bills have been blocked or voted on.
The Senate cannot, you don't need to make enemies. It's difficult enough to get things done. The power of the chair in both houses is important to keep. I know there's an argument about whether the power of a chairman to put a bill in their drawer and not have the committee hear it is a concern, and I agree with that concern, but on the other hand, there are so many instances where it's much more appropriate for the bill, though it were introduced, to still stay in the committee chairman's office. Any number of reasons, but you don't want to go attacking a chairman because you just make an enemy and you'll never get anything done. I'm a poster boy for that. I've fought the leadership in the House and got very little done for the first 10 years I was working, and I finally capitulate. It works better, I can assure you.
So I actually proposed a solution. I got it introduced maybe my first session that doesn't have to do with the chair, but would take some of these decisions out of the discretion of the chair. And that's what I call the honor rule. And it would require that any legislation that passes through the opposite chamber with a 2/3 majority would automatically be forced to have a hearing within a certain number of days. And I mean, we can go and talk about specific chairs that we're frustrated with, but this is a lasting solution that would apply to all chairs. And what it would do is it honors the work of the opposite body and it honors the will of the people. And I'll keep on pushing for that.
Thank you. Okay, this next question. When are our taxes going to fix our physical infrastructure, that is roads, bridges, etc., instead of being used to install surveillance cameras everywhere, most specifically on our street lights? 24-hour surveillance violates our Fourth Amendment. Would anyone like to talk about that?
Well, I think that the head of the Transportation Committee in the Senate will have something to say, but, and I hate to do this in public, but all that stuff you see in your town, well, that would be your road districts and your county commissioners.
Well, actually, the road districts in the cities, because the county doesn't. Some counties actually manage their roads, other counties don't. This particular county, Kootenai, does not manage roads. We escaped this one, yes. Would anyone?
This is kind of a boring one, I think, but I'm getting pestered for not talking. So I'm the chair, Doug Okonowitz, Legislative District 3. I'm the chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee. We don't really fund any. That's all. I think it was already said. That's all locally. With roads and bridges, the money those are dedicated funds. Typically, they have to be spent on roads and bridges. They can't get diverted. So that's relatively straightforward. I know I ran a bill this year. It's kind of a small bill, but it did limit the ability of local governments to employ cameras for passive ticketing, and that passed into law. So it has to be a person involved when they're running around trying to decide if you're getting a parking ticket, that kind of thing.
So it won't be like the state of Washington where you're driving down the road, you're gonna get a ticket from a camera?
That's the intent, yeah. We had a lot of pushback from one city in particular. You can probably guess which one.
Is that the one with the flag?
Yeah. Anyway, that passed, so.
And just real quick here, are we putting enough money into our roads and bridges, do you think? I mean, the state is growing like a weed, and, the infrastructure, I know being on the KMPO board up here, there is not enough money to widen all the roads to accommodate the population.
Well, I think we are putting a great deal of money in it. It's gone up a ton in the last handful of years in order to accommodate growth. But the bad part about transportation funding or planning is that it takes a long time to plan. It's
Very long cycles.
driving a giant ocean liner that doesn't turn on a dime, and they have a difficult time. And so there's lots of considerations for the transportation department. They've got to look ahead at pricing. They've got to buy steel and all this kind of stuff, and they can't just undo projects and stop midstream and divert money from one to another. Another interesting point about all that for those of us who are on transportation committees, Senator Hart, is that we don't get to decide how that money is spent, particularly in the transportation committee. That actually JFAC has a lot more say on money, but all they can do is determine how much they're going to get for the transportation department. The transportation department actually has a board that's gubernatorially appointed. They pick all their projects, they decide the priorities of them, how much they're going to spend on it. The idea behind that is to remove political pressure from which projects happen. Otherwise, Hayden would have some great bridges because I'm the committee chair, right? So they wouldn't want that. I wouldn't do that, but that's what they're trying to avoid. So we do get a lot of complaints from folks about traffic and that sort of thing, and we're happy to be squeaky wheels and talk to folks, but we really have very little ability to change much or literally anything. All we can do is talk to the transportation department, but typically they'll answer our phone calls and emails too. So just so folks understand, it's not Phil's fault that you didn't get the turn lane you wanted. So anyway.
Okay, thank you. Anyone want to add to that?
Just a couple of things, and a quick Google search says 502 million is spent the past 4 years on roads and highways in Idaho. We just passed a bill that, and I can't remember whether it's ongoing funding or 25 million for the next 8 years. So we do invest in transportation. That's one of the things that I think the government is supposed to do. But their budget, I don't remember the numbers, but I remember their budget being one of those huge budgets that was a tough one to vote for. So we do spend a lot of money on transportation in Idaho.
Real quick, so transportation funding is very stable. It's based primarily off fuel taxes and registration fees. The more people there are, the more traveling vehicles there are, the more money there is. So it should track with it. And then that money is dedicated. It can't be used for anything other than roads and bridges and safety. So the money that comes in doesn't go somewhere else, and it should be coming in at the same level that we are growing, but it'll always trail a little as you need to make repairs and build. So,
one other point I think it should be pointed out is that none of the road and bridge construction companies in Idaho are being idle. They're all working all the time. So it's not as though spending more money would do anything more than inflation and raise their prices. They're all busy, they're all working. Bridges, yes, need to be done. And a lot of places in Idaho, some of them are aging, but the bridge builders are limited, as are the highway construction people, but none of them are idle. They're all working.
Thank you.
I'd like to weigh in on that. One of the things you have to realize, one of our legislators mentioned that most of the transportation and road and bridge spending is dedicated funds, but we have, over the last couple of years, diverted some of the sales tax money to cover transportation costs. You have to realize, and I know this is a sore point, and I keep beating the drum, inflation. Inflation is a driver of the increased cost, not just for roads and bridges, but for everything the state does. Thank goodness we have a balanced budget. Washington State just announced a couple weeks ago, $18 billion in deficits, and they keep adding. They propose to raise the gas tax by 9 cents a gallon. They wanted to put a device in every car to charge you an extra 2 cents per mile that you drive. That was fortunately defeated. Not that it affects me, but those poor Washingtonians, I don't know why anybody still lives in that state. And, well,
Yeah.
you know, they got to get things under control. This quarter, we'll buy 1.8 gallons of gas. This is not just a regular quarter, it's a silver quarter. This is what we used to have as money. The current quarters we have and the Federal Reserve notes in your pocket are not money. They're not a store of wealth. They are currency. It's just like a blue chip stamps or green stamps. If you're all silver-haired folks, you know what those are. You can trade them in. The price fluctuates. That's what happens. And when there's a known inflation factor, these long-term projects get bid at a higher rate than what they would be if there was no inflation, because they have to cover the inflation costs that will happen in the future. If they don't and they get into a fixed bid process, they'll go bankrupt. So once again, 1.8 gallons, that turns out to be 14-cent gallon gas, okay? We have lost 95% of our purchasing value on the dollar on the Federal Reserve notes since the early 70s. 95% loss, okay? Inflation is going to be the death of us. And I keep saying that, and we need to pay attention to that. And fortunately, we've got somebody at the federal government level with DOGE and hopefully at the presidential level that can help get us back onto a stable monetary system, gold and silver, precious metals that are a true source of wealth, a storage of wealth.
Thank you. All right, this next question, I'm not so sure that the state legislature can do much about it, but I want to ask it because it kind of opens the door to some other issues that we likely are going to face in the future. Will you implement laws to stop the real ID in Idaho? It is incremental tyranny under the false promise of safety, security, and convenience. I know we have this real ID that went into effect earlier in the month. If you don't have it, you can't get on a plane unless you bring your own passport. It's just more and more data accumulation on Americans. Senator Hart?
Yeah, sure. I served in the House from 2004 to 2012. So one of the first bills I ran was a resolution to object to real ID because it was an unfunded mandate and there was a federal government basically commandeering the state for federal projects. So that resolution passed with quite a good margin. So with that success, the next year I ran a bill to make it illegal to accept or to implement real ID in Idaho. It was House Bill 606. When I got the number 606, I went to the clerk. I said, "Can't you give me 666?" But she said, "No, you got to wait your turn for that." So anyways, that got passed into law. It was in the Idaho Code, where it was illegal for the state of Idaho to implement real ID, which is now called the STAR card. So there was a 10-year period where I wasn't in the legislature and they overturned that. And so I would gladly run that bill again if I felt there was traction to do it, but I don't feel like the traction is out there. And by the way, I don't have a STAR card, and I almost got denied going into the INL buildings last week over in Idaho Falls, and they were kind of shocked that I didn't have a STAR card, but so I don't know, they let me in. So if there's public support for it, I would do it, but we got to see the public support.
Let me add to that, because for those of you who haven't seen the headlines lately, we have Palantir Technologies that is now going to be helping to consolidate multiple databases, have access to them in the federal government. We know that the federal government has violated Fourth Amendment rights of people. What do you think the state can do to manage to that if we start to have a federal government that is violating people's rights in that kind of a way? Does anyone want to talk about that? Is there any talk about that in Boise?
But just a general comment, we've put up with this airline garbage for how many years now? So, you know, what are we doing about it? We're doing nothing about it. We're not revolting. We're not saying to the federal government, stop what you're doing. I'm not going to comply anymore. There's nothing we can do. Frankly, I don't think there's anything we can do, unless Senator Hart is successful. I don't think there's much we can do at the state level. I think we've got to, as a population, rise up and say, I am not going to go through a scanner again. That is a violation of my rights. You are not going to force me to have a federal identification card for me to have to go from one state to another in this country. I don't have to show my papers. You know, we're heading into a situation where we're being controlled by the federal government as the movement we can make, and that is an absolute violation of our constitutional rights. So unless we as a population rise up and do something about it, you know, it's not something that we can handle at the state level, I don't think.
Yes. Representative Hawkins.
There, just so everybody knows, there have been measures that might have been on the horizon of Idaho. You may not even know. We had on the House floor a law that would allow your driver's license to be on your phone. And of course, it was sold that it was just, you know, it wasn't mandatory yet. So this whole arena of data, I don't remember the gentleman's name. I think he works for the devil. He's part of the WEF. He said that data was the new crude, and they will continue to do this. And this is back again to the folks. You're looking at a portion of 105 people who tried, well, some of them trying to fight for your liberties. And that's the role of government, is to protect your freedom, you know, and we need the folks to be involved, because not only are we outnumbered by the executive branch and the judicial branch, we're a little bit outnumbered in the legislature as well. So, you know, we need you to tell your neighbors when these things come up. Is everybody aware that they can watch the legislature in action, every committee hearing, every floor event, every day of the session? Does everybody know that?
Yeah.
You can testify in a committee via Zoom. It's not really Zoom, but you can testify from your home into committees on. We just don't have the engagement of the folks. Like the senator said, even with this one issue with the STAR card, Real ID, if we don't have the support of the folks, we can't even get those who are moderate, because they're not going to bend. They're not going to go. They're going to go with the folks who wanted to put your driver's license on the phones.
I'll follow up on that real quick. So we killed that bill in Transportation Committee, Phil and I and the folks on the committee. We had somebody from North Idaho call in and testify, and it helps. It helps a bunch. The Capitol's located in the middle of the power of the Democratic Party. So the people who show up to all our committee hearings are typically Democrats and liberals. We get a lot of them. And they'll fill the rooms. And so to have folks from our area get on the big screen, and you don't have to show your face, you can do it just with a phone call. But if you want to, you can do it showing your face as a Zoom call. It makes a huge difference. It doesn't even matter what the issue is. Education, transportation, whatever. It really is easy. It's a lot easier probably than driving there, and it helps us a lot. So I would also encourage that.
Thank you. We have a former senator, Senator Vick, who said that he passed or helped pass a bill where Idaho would not have to use the Real ID. Is that correct? Was there anything additional that you wanted to kind of add to that, or is it just we don't need to use Real ID if we don't want to? Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah, so I passed legislation, you can still get a regular driver's license in Idaho. And for as long as you want, they will enforce that. It's to fly, and for a few other things, you need a real ID. So Idaho still does not require real ID or a star card. If you want to fly, it's the federal government that requires you to have a star card. But I passed that legislation about 4 years ago. And I just thought that would be important for everybody to know. When you go in, you do not have to take your birth certificate or your passport. You can still get a driver's license the old-fashioned.
Thank you. So keep your passport handy if you want to fly. Let's lighten things up a little bit. I see more states passing dumb laws regarding plastic bags, straws, styrofoam. Are you going to keep these dumb laws out of Idaho? And, who would like to start off with that one?
Well, we're not going to propose those dumb laws. Simple as that.
Well, that's a good start, though, isn't it? Let's see. Let's go into this one. Can you make urban renewal?
Oh, I was going to
Go
just
ahead,
weigh in
Mr.
on the
Murphy.
dumb
Yes, go
laws. I think,
Are there other laws that you think are dumb that we shouldn't be entertaining?
I don't know how much I want to bait myself here, but I don't see Idaho doing things like that. But here's what we need to think about for the future and be very wary of. And we talked about it. Representative Wisniewski mentioned it in his opening, that we had how many? 2,000 plus that were drafted? 2,900. We're staring down this new horizon of artificial intelligence, this AI stuff. I'm a big proponent of less is more. And this is what we need to think about. Because now with AI, there are so many things you can do that our fear, my fear particularly, is we're just going to get like a bill mill. Stuff is just going to be coming out like crazy. And I think we need to be wary of that. I'd rather have less good bills than quantity with the opportunity for some really silly stuff. So that's my take on that. Idaho right now, I don't think we have any fear of that with this current legislation.
But you don't have the support staff either. So again, the feature is to overwhelm you with these bills without giving you the opportunity to have an in-depth reading and time to contemplate them, right? So isn't that one of the challenges as legislators when you go down to Boise?
I think slow it down. I really do. I think there was a time, there's some folks up here that probably remember, where people intimately knew their bills. They could dissect them, they could talk about them in their sleep. It's coming so quick now that even a bill you're running, often, I had an opportunity, I had about 2 or 3 bills that didn't know when I would be presenting them, and I gave my attaché one of the bigger ones, and I said, I've got talking points for this, but could you give me your perspective, right? Just look at this, give me your perspective, and give it to me at the end of the week. I came back like an hour later, and he had 8 bullet points, very specific, and it was AI. So I spent that evening comparing and contrasting what I had put together to check what he had done. And I'd literally found no substantial difference that I would be afraid to use his talking points versus my talking points. So that's what we're looking at. And I don't know how you stop the press, but I think slowing it down, spending more time, intimately knowing the issues, and having less is always going to be better than what we're staring at right now.
Thank you. Okay, so can you make urban renewal districts require a vote of the taxpayers in the proposed URD district? This is something that gets used a lot of times to, change the community that's in there. And there's very little say sometimes that the people have who live there. Any thoughts on that? Ask the question.
I was too busy blabbing, I didn't.
All right, we'll give you one. We'll give you one mulligan here. Okay. Can you make urban renewal districts require a vote of the taxpayers in the proposed URDs? Thoughts? Yes, Representative Price.
So if we could get a bill passed, we could do it, but been a lot of talk on looking at urban renewal districts. I've talked to the Speaker of the House about it, because we have kind of the same passion about it. But I know I've said it before at a town hall, the problem is that other parts of the state are using urban renewal in the right way. And so they push back when any bill gets run because they don't have an issue with it. So it's got to be a carefully crafted bill so it addresses the issues that we have without affecting the areas that are doing it correctly. So it is something that's been on the radar since I've been in office. On my standpoint in talking with the Speaker of the House, it just is the crafting of the legislation to make sure that we can get it passed. Once again, we talk about bills, we have to have a majority in the House, a majority in the Senate, and we have to have the governor sign it. So to us, it's a great idea. It should pass, no problems, but the actual practical application of that is something different.
Senator Taves?
Yeah, certainly. I'm on local government taxation committee, and I mean, I'd be happy to explore the issue and try to get a piece of legislation drafted. I haven't seen one yet. Maybe it's been more of a talk in the House, on the House side, but if the person who had that question wanted to talk about it, I'd be happy to.
Thank you. Let's move to Boise real quick. I know this kind of came up before, but are there any solutions available with the state legislature regarding the Boise mayor defying the flag law? Representative Hawkins.
There is work going on right now to remedy the problem. Unfortunately, we don't want to burden the taxpayer to call ourselves back into session every time somebody doesn't obey a law, so we won't be able to deal with it till we get it back in January. And but it will be dealt with.
And you can hold up funds to the jurisdiction or something like that.
That's correct. There's several options. One of them is the withholding of sales tax reimbursement, which I think for the Boise area is about $22 million. And
It's an expensive
stuff like
flag.
that, flags come down really, really fast. But it's a shame that we have to do stuff like that, where people who work in government can't obey government law.
Well, oftentimes the pocketbook drives behavior. So, can anything be done about Homeland Security declaring Boise a sanctuary city? And I'm not familiar with that, but are they considered a sanctuary city?
I didn't know that. What I would say is that I did sponsor a bill that passed and was signed into law that said that any city that didn't enforce state felony law would lose their funding. And so we've already done that in the past, and I don't know if it would apply to that situation, but if there's a law in the books that's a felony and a city tries to be a sanctuary city for state felony law, at least we withhold their funding, and we can certainly do that for any other situation, whether it be the flags or what the thing you're talking about there.
Yeah, thank you. Just a comment. Excuse me. This is actually from our assessor, Kovacs. The problem with urban renewal is that there is no oversight. URDs report to no authority. Then the legislature amends statute to create oversight, which I presume the legislature could do that. Is there an appetite to do something like that?
It's worth looking at. Nobody else is talking, so it's definitely worth looking at pursuing as far as the appetite goes. We have a ongoing challenge among many in the legislature in that local governments have, they spend your money to hire lawyers, or not just lawyers, but lobbyists. So they're taxpayer-funded lobbyists and associations that come down to try and derail things like that if they don't like it. So appetite would be there for a good chunk of the legislature, I'm pretty sure. Would it be a majority? I don't know. But we're constantly fighting with it's not every local government. Some of them don't fuss about that kind of stuff, but many of them do. And you were talking about the URD stuff earlier, right? The notion that the people who are going to have their taxes increased in order to fund the URDs not contributing, it's tax shift. I don't see any problem with them having to vote to approve that in advance. That makes a lot of sense. So there's always been angst around URDs, and somehow they still persist. And anyway, I think most of us up here would be more than interested in looking at some solutions that might be helpful. Senator Hart?
Thanks. I worked on urban renewal when I was a House member, and I went over to the State Tax Commission actually provides some oversight. And I went over to their office and I actually spent 2.5 days in their office. There's a room where there's a bunch of file cabinets for urban renewal. And I just went through drawer by drawer by drawer looking for urban renewal districts that really abuse the system. And I did find a few. I think at the time there were about 65. And so the oversight provided by the State Tax Commission is pretty minimal. So it is a good idea to try to put somebody to oversee that. But I don't know if it would be the governor or who. So I think maybe the solution might be that there would be an elected board, and that would give the people in the district some control over it. I don't know who else you might put in charge of urban renewal. There's been some really good ones. My family's from the East Coast, and so if you think about the need for urban renewal on the East Coast, it's really a bona fide problem, but it's not so much of a problem in Idaho. There's actually been a lot of abuses, so it probably needs to be revisited.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think this is more broadly speaking, but I think one of the core functions of this legislature is to have accountability and oversight in government programs. And so we talk a little bit about all these different bills, but oftentimes they're to remedy solutions just like this. We see so much, again, fraud, waste, and abuse, and DOGE can only go so far. I mean, if you see like what they wanted to accomplish and what they're able to accomplish, it's a percentage. And so I think just having transparency, accountability in government is something that this group is very focused on. I think we're going to continue to do, and we had a lot of good accomplishments with that last year as well.
Thank you. All right, this next question is geared towards, it actually addresses the big, beautiful bill that's going on in Washington right now. There is something in it that does kind of stand out, and it has to do with the 10th Amendment. Will that be utilized to regulate this unethical and corrupt AI infrastructure restriction that is in the bill? I guess page 291, it states that there's a 10-year ban on 10th Amendment rights to regulate, which I believe it precludes the states from having any say on regulating AI. Is anyone familiar with that?
I recently just found out about this. I sit on the AI committee, and so we have a meeting, I think, coming up in a week or two. And that's a whole function of that committee is to see what we do need to regulate within AI or look at. And so I just became aware of that, and so I've reached out to our senators just to discuss that with them in more detail, but obviously that is a large concern with that piece of legislation.
Senator Taves?
Yeah, I introduced a piece of legislation just to get the conversation started last session that actually said that that AI and programming is a form of expression and speech. So this may be, if that's the case, this is a First Amendment versus 10th Amendment question. So it might be that we shouldn't be regulating it as soon as the government, and I mean, there's exceptions, obviously, for criminal activity, but as soon as you put the government in the middle of something and they start to be able to control it, then you start to have problems. It centralizes the control. What we want is a decentralized system where people can be entrepreneurial with this, and we don't want to centralize it. I don't think we want to regulate it. I think that that's going to cause money to flow and power into places we don't want it to. So the best situation to me is to decentralize it.
Thank you. Anybody else? No?
1 second. Just so you know, and I don't know how many people up here are privy to it, there is a state lawmaker sign-on letter opposing this section of this. And so state lawmakers will be able to sign on it. I guess it's a petition letter. And the other thing that and I'm not a lawyer, I would need to dig into this more, is the federal government and even the president, they can write whatever they want. But I do not know that they can restrict the 10th Amendment access of the states. We're the parent, they're the child, and we've been fed a bunch of propaganda for about 100 years trying to switch that role. And as folks, we need just sometimes to stand up and do what's right.
Thank you. Now we're starting to get close to winding down here, so we're going to go into a little bit more of a speed round just to try to get through the rest of the questions. So if we could just kind of keep our answers a little bit brief. If you want to answer the question, answer the question. If anyone else wants to answer it, go ahead, but let's just try to keep it brief. What do you think about consolidating elections to November only? Well, that would affect our primaries a little bit, but yes.
Actually, not, the primary is not an election, it's where parties choose who they're sending to the election.
Okay, so all the issues, you'd be okay with just having one election in November for all the bonds and any other issues?
Are you talking about state paying for them? I mean, is that what we're talking about here?
No, consolidating.
Part of the question for primaries was the states paying for those elections, and should they be, since there's private organizations deciding who's going to send to the elections. Is that what we're talking about here? Or?
It's a good question. This is the question I have. What do you think about consolidating elections to November only?
The concept of increasing voter turnout, and I think that's what the heart of that question is. So I'm supportive of that concept. How that actually would work, what you could consolidate realistically is a different question. But I think it's a good idea to instead of having these small elections that are off elections that sometimes people or things fly under the radar and get passed because there's so little voter turnout. We get things, levies, whatever else in our communities that the majority wouldn't support if it was those were packaged into a larger election.
Okay.
And I do think that's the point. There were hundreds of millions of dollars passed in levies with less than 8 to 10% of voter turnout.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Now, I have a couple questions here on this, so I'm just going to bring it up. Chemtrails, cloud seeding. Is there anything Idaho is trying to do to stop?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I worked with Senator Nichols on two bills last year, which made it through the Senate but did not get through the House, two separate bills. Idaho does have a cloud seeding program, and it is designed to help agriculture, theoretically, by increasing rainfall across areas where it's needed for agriculture as well as snowcap. We separated it into two bills because we knew there was going to be opposition to any regulation on that because of the agricultural interests of the state. So what happened was, one of the bills was to say, this is what's going on, and the second bill was to say, how can we regulate it, essentially. The agricultural interests of the state were so strong that they managed to prevent us from getting anything through the House. It died in committee, unfortunately. I'm hoping we'll make a run at it again this year because we clearly have a chemtrail problem in North Idaho. In fact, today you can see it. Yesterday we had a beautifully clear day. Today the weather forecast was for the same, but if you were out there, you saw the crisscross pattern in the sky early this morning. So yeah, we're very much aware of the problem and very much want to do something about it.
That said, I'm going to take a few minutes here because when I first got there this session, we got a PhD intern that was going to help both resources and EE&T, environment, energy. And I asked her to give me a report distinguishing between chemtrails, contrails, and this cloud seeding issue. And the cloud seeding issue is not being done, all due respect, Representative Alfieri, not being done by the state. Idaho Power is doing it. she came back and said, well, LSO is limited on their ability to get information on chemtrails, so I can't help you at all. She just gave me a little, not even a report, a little presentation page that distinguished between cloud seeding and contrails of no value. Tennessee passed a law against chemtrails, and then the Department of Environmental Quality, whatever it's called in Tennessee, determined that they could not enforce it because the Clean Water Act, not the Clean Air Act, but the Clean Water Act, prevents states from making a determination as to what is spewed from jets, from planes going over them. So that even though the law was passed by the state, it's unenforceable because of the federal, our child, making the determination that we cannot have an influence on that. So although we haven't, many of us have a heavy interest in trying to figure out a way to stop this. I mean, last week I saw another jet actually making a curve coming south and then going west. I've never been in an airline that did that. And it just blows my mind that even RFK Jr. can't figure out who is doing it. Now, whether that's true or not, I mean, whether we really can't figure it out. So it's astounding to me that this is continuing. We can't figure out even who's doing it or who's funding it. And yet the states really have no power to enforce that which is being done in our skies. So it is of interest, it is a frustration, and we will continue to dig at it, but just passing a law is not going to make it. We've got to have, again, support from the population. We've got to figure out a way to push this on a federal level to see who is doing it and what they're doing. Well, we know what they're doing. They're reflecting the sunlight. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, Representative Barbieri, it is true Idaho Power does the cloud seeding. We think they do the cloud seeding, but there may be other groups involved in cloud seeding. We don't really know, and that's the problem we have. We don't know specifically who's doing all this flying. The other problem we have is we do not control the airspace in this country. The states do not control the airspace. It is federally regulated, unfortunately. So even if we pass something, we're not sure that it will withstand any kind of a legal challenge.
Thank you. All right, this next question, I'm not particularly familiar with this, but hopefully one of you will be. What is the latest info on May Matters effort by IEA and NEA to flood the Republican ticket with fake conservatives to oust the true conservatives? Is anyone familiar with any of this? Representative Hawkins, did you want to say?
We're back to the teachers' unions.
Is that what this
Yeah,
is? Okay.
and they, like I've said, they've amassed a pretty good war chest. And I don't know what their method will be. I don't know if it's going to be fake Republicans or outright Democrats. They did help the Democratic Party last election cycle put a Democrat in almost every race in the state. So that's what we're looking at. That's what this is, because they view what we've accomplished in the state. That there's a lot. I mean, people don't realize simple little things, even though we didn't make it all the way through. Things that got really close in education, things that we got out of the House side that couldn't have been done 2 years ago, and some things that we did get done. Now, today, when your kids go back into school this next fall, if they are in any K through 12 school that's run and operated on state funds, it's against the law for them to teach gender ideology or sexual orientation, period. And there is a civil cause of action, so if a parent finds that out, they can take them to court. That's now illegal here. Trying to get the chaplain bill through. We didn't make it through the House. We didn't have enough time on the Senate. We don't know if it'd make it, but to show you how they will fight this stuff, when I was in education testifying for this, we had the head of the Satanic Church come into the committee and testify in favor. Now, we think that was a tactic because the bill itself left local control in place. A school could or could not choose to have a chaplain, and they would have been reviewed and vetted by the local school board. So that guy's church getting in somewhere, except maybe in the middle of Boise, was slim to nil. So, but there's a lot of good stuff that we did, and they're coming, and we need folks to get involved.
Thank you. Okay, we're just about ready to wrap it up here. So what I'd like to do is start with Senator Hart. Just take 30 seconds, just talk about some of the big issues coming up next year and what you really want to tackle, and just pass the microphone down and let each of the representatives and senators just kind of talk about that. 30 seconds.
Okay, I'll try to do it in 30 seconds. I'm a numbers guy. I make my living as an engineer. I have an MBA and I was a finance major within my MBA program. And I looked at the state budget. Our state budget this year, as compared to last year, increased by 1.8%. That's less than inflation. When you combine inflation with population growth, we actually cut spending. There's a group in Boise that ranks us based on A, B, C, D, E, F, A, B, C, D, F. For our votes on spending, we cut spending in real numbers when adjusted for inflation and population growth. We gave a $450 million ongoing permanent tax cut. And if you add up the scores for all our legislators, we get an F. So this group gave the legislature an F for spending, even though we cut the budget in terms of real terms and gave a historic tax credit, or tax reduction. And so I just want to say that I think JFAC did a great job. I'm on JFAC too, you guys forgot. And we have a great chairman on the Senate side who deserves a huge amount of credit, who when he was in the private sector was making multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Now he's making $25,000 a year. He's doing an excellent job. He and the House chairman got us a new way to do budgeting, which has proven to be very effective. And I think the legislature did a great job on the budget this last year.
Thank you. Representative Hopkins, what would you like to accomplish next year? What are the big issues for you?
Illegal immigration, illegal immigration, illegal immigration. Unbeknownst to most people in the state of Idaho, you are footing the bill for certain industries. We haven't. So if you ever listen to the federal numbers, you already know they're all over the board. It's because we don't know what we don't know. There's between 35 and 70,000 illegals in the state of Idaho. The state is contributing between $400 and $800 million between education, medical care, police services, the whole gambit, because we don't know, and that's why that range is big. But we are coming hot, we are coming heavy, and we will tackle this in the state of Idaho, because you don't need to be supplementing industries with your tax dollars.
Thank you. Senator Lewis.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming. Really appreciate it. Beautiful day. It's tough to leave the sunshine for this, but thanks so much. A number of things, well, just in general categories. I want to continue to press hard against bloat, Doge type stuff that we talk about all the time. One of the areas that I'm particularly interested in now, and this is no offense to the present company, but is a local government. And we run into, I sort of mentioned it earlier, a lot of roadblocks when we are interfacing with local governments. And in my view, they tend to forget that they are subdivisions of state government. So when we pass policy, they're supposed to implement, and that's kind of a top-down approach to that stuff. And one of the things I get frustrated with every year, and we had an example this year where a local government raised taxes on its citizens, the maximum amount allowable, and then blamed us for it, even though we're cutting taxes and we have nothing to do with raising your taxes locally. That's all determined by your locally elected officials. So I'm looking at ways to focus a bit more on that process. I think to some degree, we sort of do what we do and then trust them maybe more than we need to. Some of them I think need a little more pushback and at least a little bit of us telling you what really happens. So,
Well,
thanks.
I accept your challenge at the basketball court, and I'll give you the 3-point spot there. So, Representative Barbier.
I'm going to continue to beat the drum of our overview of administrative rules and continue to advocate for joint germane subcommittees that review the rules during the interim. But of course, we touched on it before, this is not just an issue with respect to the legislature's ability to review those administrative rules. and to modify the way that that's done, because right now we put ourselves in an impossible situation where we're supposed to review all of the administrative rules over an 8-year period. And we have a law in place, 67-454, that creates this joint germane subcommittee, yet we don't follow it. And I think the reason we don't follow it is because we're not going to get paid for that. You get paid your expenses when you go down there, but you're going to spend 3 weeks, 2 or 3 days a week, not all committees, but many of the committees, to review these administrative rules and to begin to substantively address them. And that is extremely time consuming, taking away from those of us that are still working and trying to make a living up here. So many of the tasks that we're taking on here are not simple. They need momentum, and they need time, and they need the energy available to do that. And so I'm going to continue to work on those things, but it's not like it's going to be a panacea or solved next session.
Thank you. Representative Redmond.
Thank you. I think, through this interim session, which we're all extremely busy in the interim session as well, I think I sit on 6 interim committees, so I'm down in Boise once a week, throughout the year. And a number of issues come up through that. So one of the biggest thoughts, even when I first got elected, was, again, I'm a true believer that the states have the power and we should have more state rights. And so, one aspect of that, I think, is, when we spoke about it earlier, but is trying to at least get management of our federal dirt back, because we have, 63% is owned by the federal government. And I understand the transfer of title could be more of an uphill challenge. I think that's step 2, but I think the first step is if we could actually control that, harvest the timber, work on the mineral rights. I think that does away with a lot of the taxing issues we talk about now, and I think we'd have the most, plentiful state in the whole country.
Thank you, Senator Tibbs.
Yeah, I want to start out by sharing when Idaho is the first state to recognize Mother's Day to Father's Day as Traditional Family Values Month. And if you support that, and I think most of you do, you should know that the city of Coeur d'Alene will be recognizing that in a proclamation at the city council meeting this coming Tuesday. So if you want to come out and support that, I'd love to see you there. I also expect the governor to do a proclamation, a statewide proclamation as well. This is a huge win for families in our state. We addressed, I think we probably have the strongest piece of DEI legislation dealing with universities in the country right now, in the state of Idaho, but the work isn't finished, and so I intend to address DEI in the accreditation realm and also in K through 12, and I think that's going to be a huge battle, but it's going to be really important to take our education system back.
Thank you. Representative Altieri.
What they said. Obviously, I will continue to vote on all tax issues where we're cutting state taxes, cutting any cost of the individual. But let me go back to what's always been a passion of mine, which is election integrity. We've made a lot of progress in election integrity over the last few years. And one of the things that's happened is by placing a unique identifier on the ballots, we are moving counties away from systems that can't do that, which means that the ballots will be unique to the individual that's voting, so that they can't be duplicated. And I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, Commissioner, that our Kootenai County is looking at changing its election system as a result of that.
We are having that discussion right now.
Yeah, so this is, I think, significant progress, because we have always had questions about the current system that's in place, but over what we've done over the last few years, I think we're making some progress on that. So,
thank you, Representative Price.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for coming out and spending some time with us. I want to give kudos to Representative Redmond. He's one of the hardest working representatives that we have in the Capitol, and he needs to kudos for that. Representative Hawkins wasn't fibbing when he talked about JFAC being a huge commitment. So I really want to focus on the base budgets. I've already talked to the chairman about it and making sure that we're cutting those base budgets, those programs that were put in place and are getting funded a long time ago that are no longer in existence. We need to track those down and get those out of the budgets. I do plan on bringing the repeal of the Blaine Amendment again. There are actual lawsuits in the state of Idaho that could help with that, but we need to get rid of the Blaine Amendment. I do have some constituent issues and possible bills that didn't make it last session, but I am going to continue to protect our children from adult content. We talk about AI, but there's some AI issues with children having access to adult content through AI, and I think we need to get on top of that.
Thank you. Representative Wisniewski.
One of the first things I want to work on is in the realm of education, and that's literacy programs. About 4 or 5 years ago, we had the then superintendent of public instruction come to the education committee and brag about a couple of specialized teams that was going around the state to teach teachers how to teach students to read. And being fairly new in the legislature, I raised my hand and I said, why do we have to have specialized teams? Why don't all teachers know how to do this? Whatever those teams know should be mandatory in the teachers' colleges, because the very first thing that a teacher has to teach children is how to read. If they can't read, game over. They're going to be a disaster. And if you look at the testing that the state does between 3rd grade and 8th grade, there's a series of tests in both math and English. The highest score of proficiency on math and English in those 4 testing periods is about 42%. That means 60% of the kids are not proficient at either math and or English, or both. That's a disaster. If that program had been implemented 4 or 5 years ago, every teacher who had just started the teacher colleges would have known how to teach kids how to read. And we're still not there. This is an abomination, in my opinion. So that's one thing. Another one is to try and find out more information on the atmospheric aerosol dispersal program, which includes, it's a fancy term, I recognize that. I didn't come up with it, I can't take credit for it, but this includes contrails, chemtrails, cloud seeding, and those sorts of things. I agree that a lot of this is federal, but we need to find out where this material is coming from, what this material is, and we need to do a little more research and find out what we can do there. And the last thing is something that I talked about last time, and that is to work with Representative Barbieri on the uniform commercial code. And right now, if you own bank accounts or stock holdings or anything else, and you think you own that, through the UCC, you have a beneficial interest in those funds and those accounts. You don't necessarily own them. So if there is a financial crisis, like a major recession or something, the banks have finagled it such that they now own your funds and can use those funds to keep them from going insolvent. And this is basically commercial theft, in my opinion. We need to find out more details on that and prevent that from happening. Thank you for all coming.
Thank you. Senator Berkey.
Well, thank you, Alter Church. Thank you, KCRCC. Thank you, Commissioner Matari. And thank you all for being here. Appreciate you coming out on a beautiful, sunny summer day here. I want to claim a senior moment. I didn't forget that Senator Hart was on JFAC. It was a delayed recognition, but I just want to say that I'm so pleased to have 2 other folks from North Idaho on that committee with me. We can share that pain. With that said, we'll be working to continue that process of making changes to that budget process, providing more accountability and transparency so we can get reports like we got from the treasurer every year. That's going to be my goal. The other big goal, we talked about it a little bit, maybe something we could talk about for hours, is House 345. That's the Medicaid bill, that we have all those things, all those aspects in that bill. A lot of this stuff's happening on the federal level, but we kind of started here in the state level. There's an interim committee that both me and Representative Redmond are on, that we will be doing a lot of work to put all those aspects of that bill into place. And with the ultimate goal of about 2029 is to eventually have our model go from a fee-for-service and some hodgepodge of different contracts, like with the Magellan behavioral contract, to go to 3 managed care organizations, which will provide some competition, which would be good, and some redundancy. So that's a big lift for the state, because we are, I think about 42 other states have already made this transition. So a lot of work will take place in health and welfare, especially during the interim for that. And of course, I'm going to continue to work on medical freedom issues. That's always been my heart. We were able to get House 59 passed, the Medical Ethics Defense Act. And I see Dr. McCauley is here, and I really appreciate the help that he provided in this past session. And with that, again, I appreciate everybody being here, and thank you for supporting us.
Thank you, and I know we ran a few minutes past our 12 o'clock deadline here. First of all, I just want to say thank you. I think we have the best legislators in the entire state. I also want to emphasize that these legislators have all gone through our local central committee, the Kootenai County Republican Central Committee's rating process. Okay? Done a fantastic job. They deserve a lot of credit. This is their event. And of course, finally, the real power, the real group that has the most say as to what goes on are you, the folks in this audience, and the voters. So please stay informed. Thank you for coming out, and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.